I didn't say anything when I heard them. That's the part people always find hard to believe. They expect me to say I stormed out or slammed a door or at least said something, but I didn't. I just stood there in the hallway outside my brother's kitchen, holding a bottle of wine I brought for dinner, listening to him laugh on the phone. And I heard every word. "She won't even notice," he said. "Just add her card to the booking. She always covers it." A pause. More laughing. "Dude, she's basically our family's travel fund at this point." I stood there long enough that my hand went cold from the bottle. Then I walked into the kitchen, set the wine on the counter, and said the food smelled great. Because it did. And because I had already decided in that exact moment that I wasn't going to say a single word about what I'd heard. Not yet. I was 31 years old. I had a good job. I'm a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing glamorous, but stable. I'd worked there for 6 years. I had benefits. I had a 401k I actually contributed to, and I'd spent the last 4 years digging myself out of the $28,000 in student loans I'd taken out to finish my business degree. I was careful with money in the way that people who grew up without it tend to be. I tracked my spending. I kept a budget. I didn't buy things I couldn't afford. What I did do, for years, was say yes. It started small, the way these things always do. The first time was my brother's 30th birthday trip to Nashville. He and his girlfriend, now his wife, had planned a whole weekend with a group of friends, and about a week before the trip, he called me and said the rental house they booked was a little more than expected and could I chip in for his share. Just this once. He'd pay me back. I sent him $300. He never paid me back. I never asked. The second time was a family thing, my mom's side, planning a beach trip to the Outer Banks. I wasn't even going because I had a work conflict, but my mom mentioned they were short on the house rental and I offered to cover the gap. $450. It felt good at the time, being the one who made the trip possible. My aunt called me an angel. My mom told everyone I was so generous. I think that was when it started to feel like something I was supposed to do. By the time I was 28, my helping had developed a rhythm. Someone in my family would start planning something, a trip, a birthday dinner, a graduation party, and at some point the conversation would find its way to me, not always directly. Sometimes my mom would call and say, "We're thinking about Myrtle Beach, isn't that exciting?" And I'd ask who was going and who was paying for what. And somehow, by the end of the conversation, I had volunteered to book the house on my card, and we'd all settle up later. We never fully settled up later. There was always someone who was short, or someone who'd had a hard month, or someone who'd had a hard month, or someone who'd forgotten what they owed. I kept a notes app on my phone where I tracked what people owed me. At one point, it was over $2,000 across 4 different family members. I eventually deleted the note because looking at it made me feel pathetic. I want to be clear about something, because I've had to think hard about this. I wasn't doing it to be a martyr. I genuinely wanted to help. I loved my family. I loved being the person who made things happen. When my mom cried at the beach because it was the first real vacation she'd had in years, I felt that. When my brother texted me from Nashville saying it was the best weekend of his life, I felt that too. But somewhere along the way, the gratitude faded. The thank you texts got shorter, then they stopped, and the asks kept coming. The summer I turned 30, my family started planning a trip to Cancun. 7 people, 1 week, all-inclusive resort. I wasn't asked if I wanted to go. I was told when to request time off work. My brother called to tell me he'd found a great deal. Flights were cheap if we booked by the end of the month. And then, casually, almost like an afterthought, he said, "Oh, and I was thinking you could put the resort on your card and we'll all Venmo you before we leave." I said sure. I don't know why I said sure. I was paying down my student loans. I had about $4,000 in savings, which I had worked very hard to accumulate, and putting a 7-person all-inclusive resort on my credit card was going to eat most of it in interest and repayment time, but I said sure. Because that's what I did. The trip cost me, out of pocket after partial reimbursements, just under $2,000. My sister-in-law forgot to Venmo me her share until I reminded her twice and she sent half. My cousin never sent anything. My mom said she'd get me back when things loosened up. They never loosened up. I came back from Cancun and quietly put myself on a stricter budget to make up the shortfall. That's the thing about being the family ATM. It has a cost that nobody talks about. Not the money itself, but what you sacrifice to keep being that person. The savings goal you push back. The car repair you delay. The thing you want for yourself that you decide can wait because someone else needs something first. I didn't talk about any of this. Not with friends, not with a therapist, not with anyone. I'd convinced myself it was fine, that I was lucky to be able to help, that complaining would make me ungrateful or selfish. I kept that up for a long time. Then I heard my brother on the phone. After that dinner, I went home and I sat with what I'd heard for almost 2 weeks. I replayed it. I turned it over. I thought about all the little moments I'd ignored or explained away. The time my mom mentioned a cruise and looked at me expectantly before I'd even responded. The way my sister-in-law would copy me on her travel Pinterest boards without a word. My cousin once joking at Thanksgiving that I was basically a travel agent for this family. Everybody laughed. I laughed too. She always covers it. I thought about what that meant. Not just the money, though the money was real, and it added up to something I'd tried not to calculate and then finally did. Since I was 26, I had spent somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 on other people's vacations, dinners, and celebrations. That's not including the things I considered gifts. That's just the things framed as, "we'll pay you back." I thought about my 401k contributions I dropped from 6% to 3% the year of the Cancun trip to cover my bills. I thought about the emergency fund I'd planned to build to 6 months of expenses, still sitting at less than 2. I thought about the trip to the Pacific Northwest I'd wanted to take for 3 years and kept telling myself I'd get to eventually. And I thought about the word my brother had used, not even generous, not even helpful. Travel fund, like I was a budget line, like I was a resource to be allocated. I decided I was done. I want to explain what done meant for me, because it wasn't anger exactly, or at least not only anger. It was something that felt more like clarity. Like suddenly seeing the shape of a room you've been standing in for years. I hadn't been a loving family member who sometimes helped out. I had been a function, and I had let myself become one. The next family group chat message about a trip came about 3 weeks later. My aunt sent a message to a group of 12 family members. We called it the Family Squad chat, which I had always found aggressively cheerful, announcing that she was looking at a reunion trip to the Smoky Mountains in the fall. Mountain house rental for 5 days. She tagged me directly and added a little camera emoji. I waited a day. Then I replied, "Sounds wonderful. I won't be able to contribute financially to this one, but I hope everyone has an amazing time." That was it. The response was immediate and it was not wonderful. My aunt replied within 4 minutes, "Oh, is everything okay?" Then my mom, "Sweetheart, what's going on? Call me." Then my brother, privately, "Hey, did something happen?" Mom's freaking out. I didn't call my mom. I texted her and said I was fine, just tightening my budget for a while. She called 3 times. I let them go to voicemail and texted her back each time. All good, just focusing on my own finances right now. My brother came over 2 nights later, uninvited, and stood in my doorway with the expression of someone who had been sent to negotiate. "Nobody's trying to put pressure on you," he started. "I know," I said. "It's just, you've always been part of these trips, and Mom's worried something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong," I said. "I just can't fund the trip this time. Or going forward, really." There was a pause. I watched him try to figure out which angle to use. "Is this about money? Because if you're tight right now." "I'm not in crisis," I said. "I've just decided to stop putting other people's trips on my credit card, that's all." He left looking confused. I think he genuinely didn't understand. I don't think he'd ever sat down and added up what it had cost me. I don't think it had ever occurred to him to do that. What came next was a few weeks of low-level weirdness. My mom would call and the conversation would be normal for 10 minutes, and then she'd mention the Smoky Mountains trip and go quiet in a pointed way. My aunt sent me a long message about how family is about showing up for each other, which was rich, coming from someone who had never once shown up for me in any way that cost her money. My sister-in-law posted a series of Instagram stories about people who pull away from family that I was fairly certain were about me. I kept my responses short and warm. I hoped everyone had a great trip. I was just focusing on my own goals right now. Yes, I was sure. No, nothing was wrong. Then my cousin called. My cousin is 24, still in grad school, and has approximately zero filter. I actually love her for it most of the time. Okay, but can I ask you something without you getting offended? She said. Probably not, but go ahead. Did something happen with you and your brother? Because he said you just, randomly decided to stop contributing to family stuff and nobody knows why. Randomly decided. I held the phone for a second. Nothing happened, I said. I just decided to stop covering other people's expenses. Silence. Wait, she said. Were you covering everyone's stuff? Like, for real? For about 5 years, yeah. Cass. She used the nickname without thinking. I didn't know that. I thought everyone was splitting everything. It's okay, I said. You didn't know. And here's the thing, she genuinely didn't. She'd been in undergrad and then grad school for most of it. She wasn't in the inner circle of trip planning. She didn't know that when the rental house cost more than people had budgeted, it was me who quietly made up the difference. She didn't know that we'll all chip in meant everyone else will contribute what they're comfortable with and the rest will come from the family fund, which was my bank account. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That's really messed up." Yeah, I said. I think so too. The Smoky Mountains trip happened without me in October. I know because there were about 47 photos posted to the group chat over 5 days, which I muted. What I did that week instead, I finally booked the Pacific Northwest trip I'd been putting off for 3 years. Solo. 7 days. Portland to Cannon Beach to Astoria and back up through the Columbia River Gorge. I rented a small car, found a mix of Airbnbs and a couple of nice hotels, and I paid for every single bit of it myself, with money that was actually mine to spend. I hiked a trail outside of Portland and sat on a log for a long time looking at a river, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The specific lightness of doing something entirely for yourself without the background hum of someone else's expectations. No group chat. No, "Hey, can you look into restaurants?" No, "Does this place have enough beds?" Just me and a trail map and a thermos of coffee. I cried a little, honestly. Not sad crying. The other kind. When I got back, my mom called and asked how the trip was. I told her it was the best I'd ever taken. "You should have just come to the Smokies," she said, and I could hear the small injury in her voice. "I wanted to go somewhere for me," I said. She didn't have an answer for that. Here's the part that happened after, the part I didn't expect. About 2 months after I got back from Oregon, my brother texted and asked if we could talk. I assumed it was more of the same. Another gentle nudge, another negotiation. But when we got on the phone, he sounded different. Quieter. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said, about covering expenses." "Okay," I said. I asked around. I talked to Mom and Aunt Karen and I kind of added things up, and I didn't realize how much of it was coming from you. I didn't say anything. "I think I owe you an apology," he said. "Like a real one." I wasn't prepared for that. I'd been prepared for a lot of things. Defensiveness, guilt tripping, the slow freeze out that sometimes happens in families when someone disrupts the economy everyone else has gotten comfortable with. I wasn't prepared for an actual apology. "I heard you on the phone," I said. Then I stopped. I'd never meant to say that, but it came out. "What?" "That night at your house, before dinner, I was in the hallway and I heard you tell someone I always cover it, that I was basically the family's travel fund." The silence was long enough that I thought the call had dropped. He stopped. Started again. I didn't know you heard that. I know. That was a terrible thing to say. I'm sorry. I believed him. That was the strange part. I believed that he was sorry, and I also understood that being sorry didn't undo 5 years of easy assumptions and short Venmos and thank you texts that stopped coming. Apologies are the beginning of something, not the end of it. I appreciate that, I said. I really do. Is there any? I mean, can we figure out a way to? I still love you, I said, and I'll still show up for you. I just won't be covering expenses anymore. For anyone. That's fair, he said, quietly. And that was it. Not a dramatic reconciliation. Not a tearful group chat message where everyone acknowledged what had happened. Most of the family still doesn't fully understand why I stepped back. A few of them probably still think I'm going through something or being difficult. My aunt and I are politely distant in a way we weren't before. But my brother and I are okay. Not the same as before. Something shifted, and I think we're both still figuring out what we are to each other now that I'm not a resource. That takes time. I'm giving it time. What I want to say, if you've made it this far, is this. There's a specific kind of financial exploitation that happens in families that nobody has a clean name for. It doesn't look like theft. It doesn't feel like abuse, at least not at first. It looks like generosity and it feels like love, and it runs on your guilt and your need to be needed and your fear that if you stop being useful, you stop being loved. The people doing it are often not even consciously aware they're doing it. My brother wasn't a villain. My mom wasn't manipulative in any calculated way. They had just found an arrangement that worked for them, and they stopped questioning it. And I let them, because I didn't have the language or the self-respect to say this isn't okay. Recognizing it isn't dramatic. There's no single moment where everything becomes clear. For me, it was a cold bottle of wine and a laugh in a hallway. But it could have been anything. It could have been the deleted notes app, or the dropped 401k contributions, or any one of 100 small moments where I chose someone else's comfort over my own stability. The thing I had to learn, slowly, imperfectly, and honestly still not all the way, is that saying no to paying for someone else's vacation is not the same as saying you don't love them. It just means that love isn't a blank check. It means you have a life too. It means your financial goals are real and your needs are not less important because you happen to be the one in the family who figured out how to be stable. You are not a travel fund. You're not a safety net. You're not a resource to be allocated. You're a person, and your money is your future. The Pacific Northwest is beautiful this time of year, by the way, and I'm already planning where I'm going next. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just the quiet, honest way you start to see things clearly once you stop being in the middle of them. The truth is, nobody in my family woke up one day and decided to use me. It didn't happen like that. It happened gradually, the way most things do. One small ask at a time. One covered expense at a time. One she won't mind at a time. And every time I said yes without question, I was teaching them something. I was teaching them that my money was available, that my discomfort didn't require acknowledgement, that my generosity had no floor. That's the part I had to sit with, because it would have been easier and, honestly, more comfortable to just be the victim in this story. To say they took from me and leave it there. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I participated. Not because I was weak, but because I hadn't yet developed the self-respect to treat my own financial future as something worth protecting. There's something that happens when you grow up watching money be scarce and stressful. You spend your adult life trying to be the person who doesn't make money a problem, who doesn't create tension over a few $100s, who just handles it. And that instinct, which comes from a genuinely good place, can quietly become the thing that costs you the most. What I know now is that real generosity has to come from a place of choice. When I booked that resort in Cancun on my credit card and quietly adjusted my 401k contributions to cover the shortfall, that wasn't generosity anymore. That was fear wearing generosity's clothes. Fear of conflict. Fear of being seen as selfish. fear that being needed was the same thing as being loved. My brother didn't apologize because the universe punished him. He apologized because, when I finally stopped and he had to look at the numbers, something shifted in him too. That's how consequences actually work, not as punishment, but as information. When I removed myself from the equation, everyone had to reckon with what the equation had actually been. That's not revenge. That's just reality reasserting itself. The wisdom I'd wish on anyone in a similar situation isn't complicated. It's just this: your financial stability is not selfishness. Saying no to funding someone else's vacation while you're paying down debt is not cruelty. Choosing your own future over someone else's comfort is not a character flaw. These things feel radical when you've spent years operating under a different set of assumptions, but they are just the basic conditions of a healthy life. And the courage it takes. Because it does take courage. The first time you type, "I won't be able to contribute financially to this one," into a family group chat, that courage is worth developing. Not just for money, for everything. Once you learn to hold a boundary in one place, you start to see where else you'd stopped holding them. I'm still figuring a lot of this out. My brother and I are still finding our footing. Some people in my family still think I changed. Maybe I did. I think I just finally stopped pretending. The Pacific Northwest trip was the first thing I'd paid for in years that was entirely, completely mine. No one else benefited. No one else had a stake in it. And sitting on that log outside of Portland watching the river, I realized that's what I'd been missing the whole time. Not money, exactly. Just the feeling of my own life belonging to me. That feeling is worth every uncomfortable conversation it costs.